In today's episode, we're going to be building up those control arms. They look pretty gnarly. When they came off, they were very, very dirty. And today, we're going to be running through the process of making them as good as I can make them. We're going to be replacing those tie rods, we're going to be replacing the ball joints, and more importantly, we're going to be dealing with these bushings. Let's get to it. I don't have a tool for pressing out bushings, and I'm really loath to do that or to buy one because they're expensive, and I have a really easy way to do it on the cheap. So as every good person has, I've got a box of old bolts which I refuse to throw out because I thought to myself they're going to come in handy. And within that box we've got some high tensile 8.8 rated working load limit bolts from an old motorbike, and I thought this is going to do the trick. So a 36mm socket with a big washer, a nice high tensile bolt, and then sleeve from the bearing that I've already removed, plus some carefully positioned sockets. And if you bought that online, it'd cost you like $250, and this cost me absolutely nothing because it's all found materials, and I'll show you how easy it is for me to work. Okay, so here's the control arm, here's the bushing I want to remove. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my big bolt and make a sleeve on the other side with this massive socket and this old bearing sleeve, and that's acting as a cup which sits against the edge of a control arm, but it's big enough that it will allow the bearing, or the bushing I should say, to release into that space without blocking its path. On the other side, I'm going to grab a couple of sockets that will fit over this bearing, just in here, without getting stuck. And I found that for my particular one, a 16 works pretty bloody well. And there we go. That's the bushing freed, just using sockets and old bolts I had on hand. This is one really dirty control arm. It's got a lot of disgusting crap in it, and the powder coating is starting to come up. But before we sandblast, I've got to remove this lower ball joint, and I've ordered a new one because there is no way that this is going to be reusable. It is so rusted in there. What we're going to have to do is grind it out and cut it out so we can remove this ball joint. I don't really mind about either destroying the nut, destroying the pin, or destroying the bolt, because this whole assembly is being entirely replaced. Make sure to wear safety glasses when you're doing this sort of thing. Use a Dremel and a grinding disc to get into here. I've just gone through another grinding wheel. That's two just to remove this one rotten pin. Hopefully that's enough removed on either side to free the coronated nut. Let's give it a go, otherwise we'll go through another grinding wheel and take it down further. There we go. Thank goodness. Look at all the rust and rot coming off of that ball joint. Disgusting. Yes, so all of this rust is the pin, which has just come away near entirely In fact, I wonder whether or not we need to grind out the pin as much for the next one, or whether or not using a bit of force in the breaker bar is enough to break it because of the rust. We're going to hammer this out. I don't know why you'd pay for a ball joint removing tool when you've got a hammer. Let's inspect this thing, and I'll give you an idea as to why I'm replacing it. Look at this. Just a little bit disgusting. And I managed to find some ball joints here which are on sale for like $12 each. So the whole thing is going to cost me $24 to replace this. So why wouldn't you? Look at that. Feral. Alright, we're going to remove this bracket on the control arm. And then seal this up and it'll be ready for sandblasting. Now these control arms have been stripped down of all their parts, bushings have been removed, it's ready to sandblast. So this control arm is covered in really thick OEM paint and a layer of grime like you wouldn't believe. Because this is a powder coating, sandblasting it directly is not going to work. That was my attempt, and it was just taking way too long to get all the way through to the bare metal. What I've been using to clean up bolts is this little brass wire brush. The reason I've been using brass is that it's strong enough to take away rust and damaged metal and grime, but it doesn't damage the actual metal. To get through this powder coating, I've got two new implements. Well, new is relative. I've used one of these before, but it's ground down, so I'm replacing. I've got this flapper disc wheel, and I've got a steel wire brush, which is going to be significantly stronger than the brass and be able to do a lot more damage, taking away the solid coat of material on this control arm. I'm going to do this outside because it's going to be really dirty. So I'm just going to plug these into my drill and we can get to work. This has been wire wheeled. Now I'm going to get into the crevices with some sandblasting. Sandblasting will also add texture to the polished metal, which will help with paint adherence. Now that this control arm has been sandblasted, it's ready to be painted. I'm going to be using the Eastwood Extreme Chassis Black in the aerosol to paint this, and to make sure that it's a really good adhesion, I'm going to use the primer with it as well. The edge of this control arm looks like it's been chewed a little bit, so what I'm going to try to do is beat it down. I'll heat it up and then hammer it down and see if we can't flatten it. Still white hot, but that control arm really responded well to that beating. Now it's nice and flat, so I'm going to obviously let that cool down. And then we're going to clean it up and it'll be ready for painting. Its control arms have come finished with painting, and they've turned out amazingly. This extreme chassis paint has just blown me away with respect to its durability and the hardness of its finish. Now the control arm's been completed, I'm going to reinstall this bracket, and to do so I'll be using a little bit of Loctite just so that doesn't go anywhere. Something really exciting arrived in the mail today. We're going to ignore the political implications of this box, and instead we're going to focus on what's on the inside, which, let's be real, is the thing that really counts. We've got ourselves 2 brand spanking new ball joints, which I'm going to install on our control arms. To install the ball joint onto these control arms, it's pretty simple. It's just a matter of dropping it through and then tightening the castle knot up before putting the pin through to make sure it's not going to go anywhere. I've checked the Subaru service manual, and the torque specifications for this bolt and this ball joint is between 29 and 39 newtons of torque. Alright, so we all have our vices, okay, and I'm definitely a little bit of a tool hound. I do suffer from that disease called upgrade-itis. I've recently purchased a torque wrench. This is a Toledo torque wrench. It goes from something like 5 Newton meters of force all the way up to 150, so it's got a really wide range. And for the price point, I thought, because I've never owned a torque wrench before, I'm not really missing out on anything. I know that there are more accurate and more expensive torque wrenches that do not require calibration. But I'm hoping that this little cheapie will be able to be sufficient for the range of tasks that I require. So let's give it a shot and torque these up. So now this ball joint has been pushed into about 35, 39 Newton meters of torque. All I've got to do is insert this pin and make sure that it's secure. And can I just say, how nice is it to be working with something that hasn't been rusted to within an inch of its life? And just like that, the control arms are finished. Virtually finished. There's something very important missing. Off camera for about, I'm going to say 3 hours, I attempted to install the new bushings. And I got one in, and I wrecked the remaining 3. I've ordered a new pair of bushings, and I'm not too prideful to say I'm going to go down to my local mechanics and get them to use the shop press to ensure that these bushings are installed correctly, because the force that I'm generating on my bushing removal and installation tool, which is your spanner situation, is just not sufficient and not accurate enough to ensure that when I'm applying force, the bushings aren't being warped during the installation process. So to save myself just wasting time and destroying parts, I'm going to go down to Dean I'm going to beg him to install. And I might throw him a crisp little bit of legal tender to do that, because let's be real, they work hard, and if he can help me out, I'm not too prideful. So that's it, guys. That's how the control arms have come along. And to say that I am happy with them is an understatement. Next step, the steering system.